Welcome to Baseball Biz. I'm Mark Harvey, your host, and with me today, we have a very special guest. And I'm going to tell you something. What I'm thinking about this gentleman, I say, okay, I'm thinking pitching to bench. And I'm not talking about pitching anybody. I'm talking about a pitcher who also later took a judicial position. Is Robin Fuson. Hey, welcome, Robin. How you doing, man?
Great. Thanks to be here, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, man, it's fantastic. I know as a player and as a coach of the game and as a lover of it still, I share that with you, not the playing part, but the joy of what all is going on with this game. And I look over your career and I keep saying to myself, my gosh, to have been able to walk and do all that through, you've got like 10 years in the minor leagues and then a couple of years as a coach as well in pitching.
Yep, 3 years with Oakland doing that.
Oh, Lord, that's phenomenal. Where did all this start? How did it come to be?
Well, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a baseball player. My grandfather came to this country from Spain in like whenever, and made his way down to Tampa. And when he would sit in the cigar factories here in Ybor City, they'd have somebody that sat in a big, tall chair like a lifeguard and would read the sports page to him and the news, but mostly the sports page. And he wanted to be an American so bad, and baseball is America's game. So he adopted that as his sport. And since he came through the New York, Ellis Island, he was a Yankee fan. I never held that against him over my years. No offense to all the Yankee fans out there. But I just wanted to be a ball player. And as a little kid, I was always little. Everybody, would just, yeah, you want to be a baseball player. Good luck. Stay in school, that type of thing. And, I never made an all-star team till I was 17 years old because I was always small. But between my junior and senior year in high school, I grew quite a bit and became a full-grown man-sized guy. And everything started to fall into place. Scouts got interested. They talked me into going to JuCo ball for a year. We won the state championship. I made the all-state team.
Wow.
Drafted by Cleveland in 1978. Toiled through 10 years in the minor leagues, which I wouldn't trade a minute for. Somebody asked once on Twitter, would just generally, would anyone, not just to me, but would you trade, a long minor league career with winter ball and championships and things for one full year in the major leagues? And I said, absolutely not. Not knowing what I know and all the fun I had along the way, because I had a blast. And having fun's, to me, the most important thing with anything I do. If I didn't enjoy being a judge and love every day of it and have fun, I wouldn't have done it. People ask me, why'd you run for judge? I said, because I thought it'd be fun. I thought I'd be good at it, and I think it would be a fun job, and it's been great as well. So that led me into baseball. From there, I went into coaching. I played 6 years of winter ball along the way. Coaching wasn't really what I wanted to do, so the only other thing I'd ever considered was being a prosecutor. Went down that road. After 2 years of that, I wanted to be a judge. And the funny thing is, when I was the chief at the state attorney's office here in Tampa, a young lady that worked for me was the daughter of one of my former teammates with Boston, Wade Boggs. And she told me that if I ever became elected judge, she wanted to be my assistant. And that was in 2009 or 1999. So fast forward to 2018, I get elected, and Megan still wanted to be my judicial assistant. And she's been with me all 5 years so far, keeping me out of trouble.
Oh, wow, man. That's exciting how you evolve with all that. I want to stop for just a second because you mentioned prosecuting attorney. And I know from something I read, you had kind of a hero who you were attached to with that as a prosecuting attorney. When it was somebody who was facing off against Charlie Manson.
Yeah, Bugliosi. How does he pronounce his name? Bugliosi. He was the prosecutor in California. And Charles Manson was the epitome of evil. And a lot of folks would not make eye contact with this man because they were intimidated by him. But Bugliosi, well, my mother pointed this out to me when I was a kid, that he was the only guy that had the nerve to stand up and stare down pure evil. So that's why I wanted to be a prosecutor, because I've always grew up kind of an anti-bully. I've been in a lot of fights in my life growing up. And I could tell you 99% of them where I was always sticking up for somebody else. Maybe when I shouldn't have been doing that, sticking my nose in where it doesn't belong. But that's the kind of attitude I had, and that's the kind of guy he was. So that led me to the desire to someday be a prosecutor, which I did fulfill that. I did that for 8 years.
Well, I find it interesting about that too, because you're talking about facing eyeball to eyeball with them. And I think about that same quality as a pitcher on the mound, and not necessarily facing evil, but being able to make eyeball to eyeball contact. This is, hey, I'm delivering the goods, boys and girls. I am bringing the ball to you. I have, that part kind of intrigued me. And but I mean, there's pieces I think about baseball and being a judge that kind of come together. When I met you at the Baseball Bourbon and Cigars event in Ybor, and I remember saying something to the effect like, I think baseball, I think umpires, and then when I look at yourself and I see a judge, I'm saying somebody who has to render a decision on something that has been done. And even as a coach, making decisions who you're going to put out there.
Yeah, I mean, I've never shied away from, the spotlight. Honestly, I enjoy it. And being the pitcher, I always was cognizant of the fact that, especially on a home game, you walk out there on the mound, you're standing there, they're playing the national anthem. As soon as that song's over, everybody's going to be looking at you. You start everything off. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the challenges of it. And I never took the field when I thought I was going to lose. But I was realistic, knowing that I wasn't ever going to, I wasn't going to win every game.
Right.
But I never thought that I would lose any game I ever started. So being a judge, I'm in a criminal felony division where we deal with the worst types of crimes against humanity. We have a lot of cases in front of us where just, knuckleheads making a stupid decision. And, you give them the type of consideration in the break that may deserve for making a mistake. People deserve second chances. But in some cases, some people may not, because they're not good people. And I deal with sentencing those types of folks on a regular basis here. And I think that being around a long time and seeing a lot of things, being with a diverse group of young men my entire life, African-American, Asian, poor folks, rich folks, you learn how to get along, and you learn that basically everybody wants the same things out of life. And I think that's helped me make some good decisions, of course, across my career as a judge so far.
Well, I think the idea of what you're saying, being saturated by a lot of different cultures, a lot of different people, it has to broaden your eyesight, I should say, your vision about what's going on around you. And there's no set block of here's how everything goes. But to be able to help, guide, aid, and in some cases punish people, with that mindset, being able to have that. So I think that's amazing in and of itself. So like I said, I look at this in baseball, not like in the law, but in baseball, I see an art of deception. I see a little bit of magic, and I think of the battery between, you as the pitcher and your catcher. And, there has to be a communication going back and forth there. I'm kind of digressing a bit, but the whole idea is there's a way that you have to deliver something, and you have to deceive that batter about what you're actually becoming across that plate. And that to me is one of the most fascinating things, because you hear about pitchers with tells, maybe they're holding a glove a certain way for a fastball, et cetera. How did you face up to some of those things to make it so that to make it so that the batter didn't necessarily know what was coming into their way?
Well, you always wanted to, I'm not a believer that you have to throw 150 miles an hour and just overpower hitters.
Yeah.
You got to trick them. You got to get them. Let them. When I learned to let the hitter get themselves out, I became a much more effective pitcher.
Yeah.
Back when I was in A-ball, I would throw 87, 91 miles an hour, and I would strike out 10 guys and I'd walk 7. And then I eventually learned how to make the ball move and have control. And I'd strike out 7 guys and walk 1 or 2. And it was just a better process. So then you talk about tricking hitters, moving the ball up, down, making them move their eyes, maybe come inside, making them move their feet so they don't get comfortable, changing speeds and having location. I mean, Mike Maddox is the pinnacle of that. You watch a guy like that pitch and just how he controls the strike zone. First pitch strikes are important, things like that. But when you play long enough and with enough different teams, you get a reputation. So what I would always do was, when I was a kid, I learned how to throw a spitball.
Yeah.
So I would throw a spitball, goofing around at practice, and I'd let people know that I could throw a spitball. And then every now and then I may or may not have thrown one in a game, just enough so the folks would talk about it. And I got some videotape somewhere when I was pitching against some of my old teams, because I moved around quite a bit, where they would repeatedly check the ball. When I'd roll it into the umpire as a joke or throw it over the catcher's head. And I never threw a spitball in those games, but they thought I did. So if you can get the hitter thinking, then you're one step ahead of them. And that's why having, 3 or 4 different pitches that you could command,
Oh yeah.
you didn't have to throw, and then when the time to reel back and kind of pop one in there and kind of catch them off guard when they're looking for something off speed or breaking, knowing the hitters and things like that. But it's a game. You don't always win. Sometimes they're looking and they find it and they hit it and it's gone. So part of it.
Oh, I love it. I mean, to me, watching baseball, and I think especially today with all the cameras and the replays and everything else, and these close-ups, that you see the hand of the pitcher, how they're holding the ball, and some of the pitchers you see, they'll hold their arm almost as close to their body as long as they can before they release that. Again, another way of not allowing the batter to know what's coming their way. So the variation, the sequences that pitchers do, to me, that fascinates me. And
I held my curveball and my slider, I held the same way. And it wasn't until the last second, just depending on whether I came over the top and cut it for a slider or I came straight over the top with the curveball. And, I talked to Wade Boggs a lot about hitting, just to hear what he's got to say. And these guys that could hit, they see the ball so well. He could talk about seeing the rotation of the ball right away, and then this hitting the ball in different quadrants. The left side of the ball, the right side of the ball, to move it around the infield. They talk about it on a different plane. I remember once on a bus ride back from a spring training game, talking to those guys about hitting, and the Boston hitting coach, Walt Riniak, came flying out of the bus, ran back and screaming at me that I had no business talking to hitters because I was a pitcher.
oh Lord,
I don't know if he was kidding, but he scared the hell out of me. So I stopped talking right away. I was a rookie, so I didn't say anything back. But it was funny. Yeah, there's a different science out there for those guys that are just naturals at it. And I learned as much as I could from the hitters talking to them, figuring out how to try to get them out.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that he came back there and to give you grief over something like that, because what better way to learn than talk to basically the opposition? You're at the plate and they're on the mound.
Well, even though he was a coach for the Sox, he probably thought I was inherently the enemy because I was a pitcher. So something like that. That might have been his mindset. But he was one of the greats.
Oh man, that's fantastic. And I want to jump back for a moment because you mentioned Wade Boggs, and I know earlier this year he was inducted into the Tampa Bay Rays Hall of Fame, and I think you were a guest there as well.
Yeah,
that must have been quite an event.
It was great. He invited me and my wife. My wife was out of town, so he let me take my wife. So why don't you take your work wife with you? There's a woman I work with here is another judge who went to high school at the same time Wade and I did in this county. Her dad was a legendary local coach, and we got to sit up in the box with his family and watch the game and see the inductions and hear the speeches and things like that. And it was an honor. Every time Wade's had an important event out at the ballpark, he's always included me. Our families have been pretty close over the years, and I've been honored to be able to get an inside look at all of that stuff. The private Hall of Fame parties and the induction stuff, and his kids' weddings and things like that. It's been a great experience, and he's been a solid friend and mentor for years. So always appreciated that.
Yeah, I mean, he is beloved by this community. The people have known him for years. I mean, number 3010, watching that 3000 hit up there. And I love the story about his son that was a bat boy, I believe, during that game as well. And to me, that adds a richness to the game, all of these stories. And I know you're bound to have several of these as well. Is there, I seem to remember, I don't know if it's something you posted on Twitter. And by the way, they can find you at sinker_slider on Twitter. You share some great stories there. Did you have one on Tommy Lasorda?
Yeah, that was so I was playing winter ball and I was flying down to the Dominican Republic, and Tommy was at the airport, and I'd never met him other than just to pass him on a field every now and then. And I introduced myself, and he arranged for us to sit together on the flight over the DR. And we're almost getting ready to land. We're on that last little stretch, and there's a woman across the aisle. She leans over to him and goes, "You look familiar to me," talking to Tommy. And he's, he looks over and says, well, he goes, I'm a world famous psychiatrist and I do a lot of TV appearances in Los Angeles. And she goes, really? He goes, yes. In fact, I'm taking my patient here, points to me, to the Dominican Republic. We're going to be working on some native mental mind cleansing therapy
Lord.
for him down there. And he starts explaining all of these things he's going to do. And she's just talking to him about it and never puts two and two together. And at the end of the flight, we're coming down and she looks over at me and says, son, I want to wish you good luck and good health. Tommy goes, thank you, ma'am. And you know, she never knew that was Tommy Lasorda she was talking to. And,
oh gosh, man, I tell you what, you know, you got to have fun with this life, and obviously he found several ways to do that. Oh
yeah, and he lived baseball. I mean, he was an icon. That to me was the best part of the game, was all the personalities.
Jeez. I know had Chris Smith on here. He came up for a cup of coffee, I think, with the Yankees and the Blue Jays, and was a pitcher with them. And to hear all the stories, you know, that the people you meet, the people coming up, and he's talking about, he says, man, I was as much a fan as I was a player, you know, with some of the folks I got to meet, you know, through this. And the stories are amazing. And like I said, I'd like to hopefully have you here sometime to talk in depth, maybe on the Dominican Republic or on Mexican leagues, because that's got to be fascinating. But you speak Spanish, right? That had to help too.
Yeah, porque yo hablo español cuando yo necesito.
Okay.
Si yo tengo hambre, yo hablo todo en español.
Got it.
So when I'm hungry, I speak perfect fluent Spanish when I'm hungry, because I don't ever want to miss a meal. So that's the first thing I learned how to do. In fact, when I was hired by Oakland to be a coach, one of the requisites was that I was able to communicate with the Latin players, because we had a school in the Dominican. We bring these young kids over.
Right.
And I had to be able to interpret everything the American instructors were telling them. So I did that for 3 years. That's part of it. I also worked with the big league rehab guys. I had like a great job because it was a lot of different things to do.
I mean, that sounds exciting, because it doesn't sound like you'd ever get bored doing just one thing.
Yeah.
And well, tell me a little bit about the transition from player to coach. And did you have to have a different mindset? Did you see the game differently once you took on the mantle of coach?
Well, there were two things. One, I had to learn that, I mean, I wasn't the greatest pitcher that ever played, but there were some kids that, you know, that I didn't think they weren't as good as I was. And you can't, that's why I think some of the great players might have a problem, because nobody's ever going to be as good as they are. So you have to get this player. And one of the things that I had the hardest time was getting the player mentality out of my head. You know, I was enforcing rules with kids that my whole career I spent trying to figure out how to break, you know, staying out past curfew, you know, eating food in the bullpen, screwing around, having fun between starts, all of these different things. And now I'm trying to put the hammer down on people. So that was a tough transition. I still thought I could play, but the reason I got out of playing was I had plenty of opportunities to sign another AAA contract, but I couldn't get a team that would guarantee me an invite to spring training at that time. And I wasn't going to go at 10 years. You know, you go from being a prospect to a suspect. And eventually, you know, they're not going to let you play anymore. So I went out on my terms, and I didn't even the coaching offer was just a fluke. Oakland calls them and says, hey, we're looking for somebody that speaks Spanish and can do some things for us. And I initially said no. And my wife said, why don't you just fly out there and talk to them? So I flew out to, I think I met the guys in our spring training facility in Scottsdale and interviewed with Carl Keel, who's passed away, God rest his soul, and Harvey Dorfman. They had a team psychologist that was there at the time, and Keith Lippman, I think, who's still involved with Oakland. Okay. He might be the director of the minor leagues for them. And so I met with those guys, and they liked what I had to say. And they said, hey, if you want a job with us, we'll let you work 6 months. We'll pay you year round, and you can go back to school in the off season so you don't lose track of that ultimate goal if, in fact, you decide. And the fact that Sandy Alderson, our GM, was a lawyer, and Tony LaRussa was a lawyer. When I made the decision to get out and go to law school, they were very supportive and understanding. So that's how that. But I really still felt I could play at the time. And it was hard for me to transition over. The thing that saved me mentally, I think, was all the big league guys that I'd rehab in Scottsdale. You know, like Jim Corsi was there for several months, and Mike Moore came down there. I tried to rehab guys like Floyd Bannister was trying to make a comeback, and Guillermo or Willie Hernandez, who didn't want to be called Willie anymore. He wanted to be called Guillermo. So that was an interesting time. But we had a lot of fun trying to put some people back together and work out some problems that some of the current guys were having.
Yeah, and I think from what I see on the outside, you're working with young players, and sometimes you're working with talent that's very much at the top, and you're dealing with personalities that sometimes may be open and sometimes the door is closed as far as actually listening to anything coach says.
Yeah.
Quickly, I'll mention I worked down at the Tampa Baseball Museum, and I listened to this one thing they say about Al Lopez and what was most difficult thing as a manager. And he said, managing 25 personalities. And I'm thinking, as a coach or as a manager, that has to be something because you've got all these people that you want to nurture, and you're not necessarily able to do that in the one uniform way.
Right. I mean, you got 25 alpha personalities in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some competition because, there are a lot of guys just waiting for the other guy to make a mistake so they get an opportunity. And you try to be a good teammate and you try not to show that. But I mean, in your heart, you want to play. I was lucky that everywhere I ever was, I started every fifth day. I never had to sit and wait my turn. So, but you get a manager who, like you said, has to deal with that type of situation, and it's hard.
Yeah.
So being a pitching coach, it's easy because I get to be the good guy, the friendly guy, the guy the guys can come to and complain to and bitch to, and talk about some of their personal problems, especially a lot of young players. Some of them weren't even sure they wanted to play baseball because they missed home and things like that. And my advice, I'd give them advice and tell them what I thought was best for them, but it's individual to everybody. But being a manager would be a lot harder than just being one of the support coaches.
Yeah, I see that. And what you talk about people coming up from the DR, I know from some books I've read in the past about Pedro Martinez and David Ortiz, and there can be a homesickness or other things. And some of them already go back home, but they know they have to persevere if they want to do anything with that career. So nurturing those young men has to be like a real challenge. And like I said, you can be that open ear to them or listen to them as opposed to somebody who's coming down saying, this is what you got to do, or we're sending you back.
Right. And they support each other a lot. Those big league guys from the Dominican Republic and Venezuela, they really nurture their younger players. They don't forget about them. And in the winter ball, when I played, those big league guys played every day, just like all the kids did. I mean, my infield when I was in the DR at one point was Alfredo Griffin played second base and Rafael Ramirez from the Braves was at shortstop. Gerald Perry was at first base from the Braves. Bonnie Castillo from the Mariners who played third base. And John Lickert, the journeyman with the Red Sox, he was the catcher, and you're playing against guys like Oral Hershiser, Pedro Guerrero, Tony Pena. I got to throw to Pena in the All-Star game. And these guys treat their fans and their young players like their family. And when they come over here, they know the troubles they had going through the minor leagues and living in, places in the middle of America where they're the only word, you'll never find anything close to Spanish except the Taco Bell. And they have to adjust to that. It's always nice to be able to help them. I mean, I always did well in Latin America because I loved the culture and the food and the people and knew the language. But when you come over here and you don't know any of that, it is tough to stick around and play hard.
You're talking about people in the DR and how much they love the game. I mean, the Dominican Republic has brought a wealth of players into Major League Baseball. I'm excited because this upcoming year, they're actually going to hold one of the foreign games. It's not going to be in London. I mean, they had one in London this year, but they're actually going to have one in the Dominican Republic next year. And that's got to be, I can't imagine the excitement or how everything will just be blown out for that place. It's got to be nuts. But
it'll be crazy. The fan, I mean, they don't, at least when I played there, they didn't play soccer in the Dominican Republic. They played baseball. And no matter where you went, you'd see kids on a field, and like a vacant lot filled with rocks and sticks and stuff they'd be using cardboard as a glove because nobody had spikes.
Yeah.
And some old taped up old baseball. And whenever we would leave the DR, we'd give them all of our equipment, all of our gloves and spikes. We just leave them there for the kids. And they loved it, man. They love playing the game. And they swing at every pitch. And I always ask them, why are you guys so aggressive at the plate? I like pitching it. He goes, because you don't walk off the island. You gotta swing the bat to get off.
Ooh, I like that.
That's their mindset. So,
well, we're talking about Dominican Republic about bringing so many players. But to me, it's also interesting looking locally. I think of Florida and Tampa as almost a cradle of a lot of players coming up, whether it be yourself and contemporaries like Wade Boggs, looking a little further back in time and seeing Lou Piniella, Tony La Russa, more recently, Kyle Tucker and Pete Alonso. I mean, those are just ones that popped in mind. But what do you think what is the reason we see so much of that in Florida, in Tampa?
Well, the weather. We get to play outside all year round, and it's kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy because now we've had so many good players here, and we've had the great coaches, men and women who've dedicated their entire lives to coaching the kids in this area, and there's just such an easy access to it. And this was before all of the travel ball and everything. That's so cost prohibitive. A lot of families don't get in it. But we would play our 20 games in high school or whatever we played. And then we'd play our 20 games in summer. And then all you did was think about the next season of baseball. You'd be out in the street playing pickle or hot box, whatever you call it. Wherever you live, we used to call it hot box. The old rundown drills. So if there were two of us, we just play catch. There were three of us, we played hot box. If we could get 5 or 6 of us, we'd try to play a game against 5 or 6 kids from another neighborhood. And just, we played basketball and football in between all of that too. But if you love baseball, you couldn't wait for it. And so we never burned out on it. Baseball wasn't on TV 24/7.
Right.
So you were jonesing for a game once a week. I'd listen to the Atlanta Braves on the radio because that was the closest team. Back when Milo Hamilton and Ernie Johnson were calling the games, and Felix Millan was the second baseman, and Dusty Baker was there, and Phil Necro in the glory days. And then you just wanted the game. You couldn't get enough of it. You were hungry for it. Just being able to play it all the time and think about it, and now it's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
One thing I look at today, and I'll question whether it's there as much. One, I'll tell you real quickly. We called it a hot box where I was in Louisville, and we had little pieces of cardboard out in the middle of an asphalt street, and that's where we played it. But what I'm thinking about as youngsters coming out there, we had little leagues, and you had the parade that would practically march through the entire little city of Shavley where I was at, and there's not so much of that now because there is like the Cal Ripken League and the different traveling teams. And I feel like, I don't know if we're actually going to lose interest from people with that. And the entry level is such because some of the costs I see on bats and gloves these days. And
it's crazy.
Yeah. And then the families had to come up with money for the travel, et cetera. So I don't know if that's making a negative impact of the game, but I hope not. Because I look back to were you in the Northside Little League?
I went to Northside. They've moved over. Kevin Cash went to Northside, but they were at a different location. But I was at Northside Little League growing up. We were so small that when we got to senior league and big league, we had to combine with Lutz, which I kind of grew up in Lutz anyway, which is a small rural area of the north here. And then we were the Lutz Northside Senior League and the Lutz Northside Big League. I played one game. Actually, I pitched a couple of games, I think, for the Tampa Smokers when I was 17 years old. I was a semi-pro team. That was right before I got drafted. So it was nice to be a part of that legendary organization, at least for just a bit, just to see I wore the uniform.
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking about it because right now we've just gone through the draft, as far as the MLB and who's coming up, and all the teams have selected their players. But we also have a very critical place, and talk about judgment. And that is August 1st, the trade deadline. Teams have to decide what players that are worth keeping, or there's somebody at another team that they're going to bring in. And that makes for a very difficult time. I saw a video this morning of Daniel Robertson being traded from the Mets to the Miami Marlins.
And, a lot of controversy over that.
Yeah. And, when they come up to him, Rob, and I've seen them, and it's like, so how does it feel? Or how do you feel about this trade, Daniel? And he, as honestly as possible, tells them, yes, it's difficult. He loves all the people in New York, but he's glad to be going to see a team that he wants to fight with for, a division as well. So I don't know. It's got to be a difficult time. And I mean, there was times in years, because you played with both the Cleveland organization and the Boston organization. And were there trades, or was there times how did that work for you? How did they go?
This is a funny story. There was an executive for the Cleveland Indians who didn't like me very well. He was our farm director, and that's not a good thing. His name was
No.
Bob Quinn. And Bob and I did not see eye to eye. I was the kind of guy that every year they send you a sheet. Who do you want to room with in spring training? You put down a name of a couple of guys, and they would try to pair you up. So I'd always, you try to room with the same guy. So I would always put down the names of two guys that Cleveland had traded and were in the big leagues with other teams. So that used to tick them off. And so anyway, at the end of Bob Quinn was at the end of his road with me, and I'd just come off a 13-win season in the minors. And he said, and it was my option year, and he said, well, you're not going to play this year. I'm going to bury you. He goes, we want you out, but we don't want you to go anywhere.
Oh.
And so, yeah, right to my face. So I said, fine. So when I start the season in Buffalo, New York, and it's 84. But the organization is decimated with injury. So, of course, I'm in the rotation again. The first 4 games I pitch, I'm 4-0.
Ooh.
Well, Doc Edwards is up in Maine, our AAA club, because I'd been in AAA. He wants me back up there. So he puts the word out. Cleveland, the front office, overrules Bob Quinn. I go to Maine. I'm 4-0 in Maine. And then Vic Aubrey, our pitching coach, walks into my room. We're on the road playing the Boston team in Pawtucket. And he goes, hey, Fuson, we got to go find Doc Edwards. Apparently you're now a Boston Red Sox. Like, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, I don't know either. So we go find Doc. Doc calls Cleveland. Cleveland had monkeyed around with my contract so many times, moving me up and down, that they'd run out of options. And when they moved me down to AA and back to AAA with that short period of time, they didn't put me on. They had to put me on waivers first to see if another team wanted me. They didn't give a team any opportunity. So Major League Baseball ranked the AAA organizations of every team from worst to first, and they started down the list. And if somebody wanted me, they had to sell me for half the Major League Rule 12B or whatever it is, of 25 grand. So they had to sell me for 12,500. And the first team on the list was the Red Sox. They bought my contract. So I went to the park and just switched clubhouses. And the funny thing was, all this had happened a few days earlier, and they were waiting for all the ink to dry. And I was sitting down, and I had pitched like the night before against the Red Sox, and I was sitting down in the bullpen in full catcher's gear, warming up guys, screwing around. I love the bullpen. All good things happen in the bullpen. And the bat boy runs down there and says, hey, Doc says to quit effing around down there in the pen. I go, what do you? He never said that to me. He kind of let me, So I said, oh, whatever. He's the skipper. I'll do it. So I take all the gear off and I sit down. It was the one of the Red Sox front office guys had seen me in the bullpen, knowing that if I got hurt, they were on the hook for the 12-5 in me. So they sent the bat boy to go down there and tell me the doc told me not to. Ooh. So, and the beauty of the whole season was we ended up getting into the semifinals. I pitched a crucial game against Columbus to beat the Yankees that put us into the playoffs against my old team, the Maine Guides. And we was a best of 5. We were down 2-0. And we were on the road in Maine, had to play 3 games there. I pitched game 3 and won. I coached first base and was trying to get inside their heads. We won game 4, and then we won game 5. And when I went into the clubhouse to say goodbye to all the old, my buddies that I grew up with, for the Bob Quinn walks in, and I look at him, and he looks at me, and he just turned around and walked out, and everybody in the clubhouse just started laughing because I don't think he had too many fans in there either. To be honest with you. Well, that's how I got over there. It was a rule violation by the Indians.
Well, and shame on them is all I gotta say, and missing an opportunity.
I mean, go to spring training with the Red Sox the next year, and everything was great. So,
wow, yeah, and it was you went on with was it the AAA Pawtucket? I can't think.
Pawtucket Red Sox.
Thank you, Pawtucket Red Sox. The Paw Sox. That was I was trying to come up with. And come to think of it, you had a connection there. Wade Boggs had actually played with them as well. I think at one point. Were you both there at the same time?
He was already in Boston at the time, but in '81 I was in that league when we were in Charleston, and I played against him in the minor leagues there. And we were friends because we knew each other in high school, but we just knew of each other.
Right.
In '85, when I was in big league spring training with the Red Sox, we got to be really close, and that's how everything has kind of spawned out from there.
Well, let me ask you now. We're looking at 2023, and we're seeing these teams. It's interesting because pitchers are not being seen as often by people in the same division because we're not playing the same four teams over and over and over again. We're still seeing them more frequently than other teams. You think that's a benefit to the pitchers, or that they're not being seen as often by the same team?
If you're predictable and limited in your pitch selection, yeah, it's an advantage to the hitter. But if you can throw 3 or 4 pitches at 2 or 3 different velocities and throw them where you want them, I maintain if Maddox pitched in today's league,
yeah,
he might win 30 games. Because these guys are all sitting back there with that launch angle stuff. Look at the batting average. How many 300 hitters are in the big leagues right now? There's very few, 9, 8, 6.
Yeah, not many. I
mean, it's easy to get people out. They get themselves out. So, yeah, home runs are exciting. The fans like it. Look, I'll be honest. Up front, I'm an old guy, so get off my lawn type of thing. I'm not a big fan of the pitch clock, though you can't let hitters and pitchers screw around for 15 minutes. I mean, I used to pitch sub 2-hour games when I was in the minor leagues. Granted, we didn't have TV timeouts, but maybe that's the problem. Just get the ball and go to work. Remember who was it? The Mike Hargrove, the human rain delay. Every pitch he would step out and adjust batting gloves and tug on a shirt, and things like that. Yeah, we got to work on that. But I also am not a big fan of limiting throwing over to first base. Talk about Mexico. Eddie Miller, former player from the big leagues, was in Mexico trying to make a comeback like I was. And Eddie got a leadoff hit off of me in some game, and I threw over to first base 17 consecutive times and on the road. And the fans were booing, screaming. And on the 17th throw, I caught Eddie leaning, and I got him. And he walks off the mound bitching at me. And I said, "Hey, brother, it's a tough league." And when I got him out, though, even the visiting fans gave me an ovation after 17 times. You do that today, you can't do it. I mean, it was, it was Mexico. I wouldn't have probably done that in the States, but it was just fun playing that game with Eddie. But there's so many rule changes that try to make the game faster, but take away a lot of I think the essence of the game. Now you can steal a base anytime you want.
Yeah.
Catchers on the knee. I've talked to a major league catcher friend of mine, a former major, played 13 years in the big leagues. I won't mention his name because I don't have permission. But I called him up and I asked him, what's up with this one knee stuff? And he told me that it was more important to try to snatch a strike into the strike zone than it was to block a pitch. He shows the game changed. And I said, well, that's a sad state of affairs, because I saw the Rays 2 weeks ago lose a game in the 10th inning on a wild pitch.
Yeah.
Where the one-knee catcher tried to backhand the ball lazily rather than bouncing out there and blocking it and saving the run. I don't know. It's a different game. Maybe it's for different fans, but I think that that's why I went late into the order every time I pitched, because you weren't going to see the same pitches from me. I was going to change pitches. You might get 3 fastballs and a slider. Next time you might get 4 curveballs and a sinker. You never know. And that was the idea. The hitters would never know. I remember running into a Dutch, the catcher for the Phillies.
I can't recall his name.
Let me think. Anyway, he says to me that I meet him at a party at Wade's house, and he looks at me and he goes, Fuson, sinker, slider. That's how he remembered me, because he keeps the book. They know what pitches you throw. So everybody knows what I'm going to throw. They just know when I'm going to throw it or how I'm going to throw it. If they were looking the same way I was looking, they could wear me out. I mean, there were some times when things didn't always go so well. And then you turn around the next day and you could, one of the worst games I ever pitched, I followed up against the same team 4 days later with a no-hitter. So you never know. And that's what the great thing about baseball is. So, and I love that cat and mouse stuff. And when those guys got me and they're rounding the bases, I'm talking to them. God damn it, how did you know that pitch was coming? And sometimes they say something back, sometimes nothing mean. Right. It was more out of respect. And that's the part I like too about the game. There was a respect. You didn't try to show people up. You hit a home run off of a guy back in 1980 and then flip your bat, or the 50s or the 60s. What would you think Don Drysdale or Bob Gibson would have done?
Oh
I
Lord,
would not want to tick those guys off. But
no. I mean, you would see benches completely pulled. Everybody would be out there,
yeah,
and
and nobody would do it.
no,
I'm not going to strike somebody out and act like I just got the final out of the 7th game of the World Series. Why do you act like that when you hit a home run in the 3rd inning? When you're down 5-2, so it's the game.
I'll mention quickly is a few games back with the Rays, and I was watching Jose Siri, who's been phenomenal, and he hits the home run, and he's a showman. Okay, matter of fact, real quickly, I'll state one of the people from Bally has spoken with him. Said question was, "Hey, Siri or Jose, if you were not playing ball, what would you want to be?" He said, "Actor." I thought that's perfect because he's a showman out there, whether he's catching the ball or not. But anyway, he hits the ball all the way out there, and man, it barely makes it over the rail. But you see him with his celebration, and God love him, appreciate the home run.
Yeah.
But he's just watching it before taking 2 or 3 steps slowly and then tosses the bat. I was like, oh, geez, dude, come on, really? But
if you've never hit a home run before, then I might give you some, a little leeway.
Yeah.
But act like you've done it before, The NFL encourages it for the guys to celebrate in the end zone. They allow it now because it's what the fans want.
Yeah.
And look, if all it is entertainment to those folks, and if that's what they want to do, that's fine. But when I played, man, it was a business. This is the way I fed my family, right? I depended on a paycheck. And if you're up there trying to make me look bad or something like that, and I can't own my part of the plate or do what I need to do to succeed, then I should just quit and go home. So
I want to go back to something you were talking about a moment ago about the 17 pitches over there to first. And I got to tell you one thing I liked wasn't so much impact. Well, it impacts the pitcher, but the batter, man, they could step out just about any time they wanted for as many times as they wanted. And I was kind of glad to see that go away because I thought, one of my favorite batters is Yandy Diaz, but he was notorious for that. At least I thought from when I said, come on, Yandy, let's play the game, And again, I'm not looking for it to be sped up, but I like some of it.
Back in the day, the umpire didn't have to give the guy timeout.
Yeah.
There was at least twice in my career that I threw pitches. Unfortunately, I was 50-50 on a strike where the guy backed out of the box and the umpire didn't give him timeout. And I just had and call a strike. One time I threw a ball, but, and the hitter's bitching, but it's not an automatic thing. You raise your hand and ask for timeout. You don't always get it.
Yeah.
So the umpires could control it at that point. And you could warn a pitcher if he's jacking around out there and taking too much time. But let me tell you something. A game's on the line. It's July and you're playing in the South somewhere, and it's 110 degrees on the field. The 7th inning, 8th inning of a game, you might need to take an extra second just to get your breath. Or you tweak your arm or your back a little bit. You just might need to walk it off. And it's not really injury, but you might need that extra 4 or 5 seconds to stretch it out. I think a lot of the injuries are due to the rapid nature of the pace of the game. It's unnatural for some people.
Looking back from just not on the pitch clock, but looking at allowing some amount of sticky stuff and seeing people like Tyler Glass now, there was some consideration that may have caused him where he needed to be out. But with the timing, with the pitch clock now, I couldn't help but think of the frequency and the immediacy that a pitcher has to come back and bang, 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 bang. And you're throwing, especially a closer, 100 miles an hour sometimes. Right. If you cannot physically get yourself comfortable and adjust at time, I'm really concerned. I got to tell you, Robin, that we'll continue to see more injuries more frequently.
And they're running so many guys out there in the course of the game. And I don't care if you throw 8 innings or 8 pitches. Sometimes the effect is the same.
Yeah.
Different people respond differently. Now, in the 10 years that I played, I never missed a start. And I would throw 150 pitches a game sometimes. Like I said, when I started, I would try to strike everybody out. I didn't want to give up a hit. And you learn to play the game the right way, and your pitch count goes down. But in 82, I think I pitched over 220 innings in the minor leagues. I started 30 games. I completed 15. I was going 7, 8 innings for at least in all of them. Then I get down to the Dominican Republic and I pitch another, I throw another 100, 110, 120 innings.
Jeez.
Now, so if you get a guy that's coming out of the bullpen middle guy. You're going to be my two guys today. By the time you get up and heat up and go out there, you might need a full 5 days to recover, like a starting pitcher.
Yeah.
But then they're running you out there 3 days later because you're pitching by committee, and you're not right, and you get hurt. Your specialists, your relievers, the guys that prove that they can pitch 2 days in a row, but they're only pitching to 3 hitters in 2 days. Then they might need 2 or 3 days off.
Right.
Your short guys, your middle guys, your long guys. But man, you should be getting 6-7 innings out of your starter on an average outing. But they're not doing that anymore. And people are getting hurt.
If you could only watch one game this year, which pitcher would you like to see take the mound?
Well, I don't know if he's healthy or not, but I kind of like Lance McCullers Jr. His daddy and I are friends. We grew up together in Lutz. And I'd like to see that kid do well because I know his family, and I know that the history of that family is just solid people. And there's one guy I hope that really comes around and does well.
And his father was actually a Major League Baseball player too.
He was. And if you grew up in Tampa and you didn't work at one of Lance's family's Christmas tree lots at the corner of some high school in Hillsborough County, Florida, then you didn't really play the game of baseball. They were famous for selling Christmas trees. And I think they still sell them.
I love it.
It was a good time back then.
Well, I look forward to seeing him come back too, because they're young talent, and that's the one thing I do get concerned about is their health. So, well, that's very cool. Thank you, man, for sharing that. I appreciate it. Robin, I want to thank you for coming on today. Any special last words that you want to share with the audience?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, and the folks that that do follow me on Twitter. Look, as a judge, I'm not allowed to say anything controversial about anything, guns, whatever. I'm just middle of the road. I never have no comments, but I'm allowed to talk about sports, and I love to talk about baseball. And mostly, I just like to tell stories. I'll comment on some current events and things, but like somebody asked me, there was a question about Twitter about playing in Tidewater. They wanted a story about, an experience of the ballpark in Tidewater. And I just remember once that Kevin Williams, remember Kevin Williams for the Mets, and he played for the Giants. He's the guy that made the one-handed catch.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Baseball. Well, Kevin had been in a brawl the night before with another team. And so when we got to the park, I heard about this fight he was in. So I thought it would be funny. And Kevin's a big guy, so you don't want to tick him off. But I had the trainer tape my hands up like a boxer with the athletic tape. Yeah. And I put some Band-Aids on my face, and I wore a cape. And I came running out of the dugout like Ali dancing around. And I came up and I challenged him to a fight. And I was, shadow boxing him and stuff like that. And he thought it was the funniest thing. Thank God he took it the right way, because I really it probably wouldn't have ended well fighting Kevin Mitchell. But that's the type of thing. The stories I like to tell that I just remember, the personalities, the guys you play against. I mean, I played against so many guys that went on to be great. And it was a privilege to, be with them along the way, guys like Billy Bean and Ron Darling, Sid Fernandez, Wade Boggs, Tony Pena, Oral Hershiser, Pedro Guerrero. Got some of the great players that just had an opportunity to make an impact on me. And because I know how hard it is to play at that level, and to see these guys that do it for so long, I'm still awed by it. And I think that if you love the game, don't quit watching it. And if today's style of game is what you like, then I'm happy for you, because it doesn't hurt to have people love the game of baseball.
I hear you. Well, I want to thank you again for talking with the Honorable Robin Fuson. He's the judge of the 13th Circuit Court in Florida. I got that right?
Yes, sir.
All right, every now and then. But man, I can't thank you enough. It was a pleasure meeting you, months ago, and I just respect anybody who's been playing the game, who's done all the things you've done with it. And, and sometime I want to talk to you about the Oakland A's, but we'll save that for another day.
Oh, yeah. Good story. So something to hold in the past. I actually spent a season with Grady Fuson, no relation, but it was Fuson and Fuson. And he's the scout in Billy Ball that allegedly gets fired over the controversy. But Grady never got fired, and he resigned and went to Texas. And in fact, Billy and him were close enough that Billy hired him back, and he's still he's the scouting director for the Oakland A's. But anyway, I can tell you all kinds of stories.
Yeah, man, I love it. I love it. I love the history. I'm glad you have enjoyed all those years and still relish them and have people that you can talk to who did that with you and sharing it with us. So, Robin, thanks again for being here on Baseball Biz on Deck.
Mark, I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, brother. Well, you take care and have a wonderful day.
All right, you too. We'll see you.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Special thank you again to the Honorable Robin Fuson for sharing his wit, wisdom, and stories about minor league ball, coaching, jurisprudence, and just a love of the game. You can find Robin on Twitter, and let's see, his handle is at @slider_sinker, and that's Robin Fuson. Man, thanks again. Loved having you on here. All the rest of you, we'll see you here soon as well. Special thanks to XTakeRUX for the music Rocking Forward.